The roar of the crowd was deafening, a wall of noise crashing over the blood-stained sands of the Colosseum. The setting sun bathed the arena in a crimson glow, as though the heavens themselves acknowledged the bloodshed. Kairos stood at the center, his chest rising and falling with each ragged breath. His muscles ached, his body a tapestry of scars both fresh and ancient. Across from him, his opponent lay motionless, the tip of Kairos' gladius still dripping with blood. The fight was over. He had won. Again, a voice boomed through the arena. "The undefeated, the ghost of the arena, the gods favor you, Kairos!" The crowd erupted once more, chanting his name, but he barely heard them. He had been fighting for years, always winning, always surviving, but never truly living. Every victory only extended his time in chains. Freedom was a distant dream, dangled before him like a mirage in the desert. As his master, Lord Cassius, stepped forward with his usual smug expression, Kairos clenched his jaw. "Another triumph," Cassius said, his voice oily with satisfaction. "Perhaps one day you'll earn your freedom." A lie. He had promised it 100 times before. That night, as Kairos sat in his dimly lit cell, sharpening his blade, a shadow loomed at the bars. "Kairos," whispered a voice. He turned to see a cloaked figure. "Who are you?" "A friend." The figure slipped something between the bars. A key. "Your freedom lies beyond the gates. But beware, the path ahead is not what you expect. Go now, before the guards change shifts." Kairos didn't hesitate. He had dreamt of this moment too long to waste it. He unlocked his shackles, slipped into the dark corridors, and moved with the silent grace of a predator. As he reached the outer walls of the Colosseum, he spotted a single black carriage waiting. The same cloaked figure gestured for him to enter. "This better not be a trick," Kairos growled. "You have more to fear than tricks, warrior." The words sent a chill down his spine, but he climbed in. The carriage rode deep into the countryside, where the air grew colder, the forests darker. Hours passed before it stopped before a towering mansion. Its windows were dark voids, its walls covered in twisting vines, as if nature itself sought to reclaim it. "What is this place?" Kairos asked. The figure only whispered, "Your true battle begins here." And then they vanished into the night. The massive iron doors of the mansion creaked open on their own. A rush of cold air slithered out, carrying whispers Kairos couldn't quite understand. With no other choice, he stepped inside, and the doors slammed shut behind him. The sound of the doors slamming shut sent a jolt through Kairos' body. He spun around, his instincts sharpened from years of battle, but there was no one there, only silence. The air inside the mansion was thick, heavy, with the scent of dust, and something rotten. A vast entrance hall stretched before him, its marble floors covered in a fine layer of dirt and broken glass. Towering pillars lined the room, their intricate carvings eroded by time. A grand staircase curved upward into darkness, while corridors stretched in either direction like veins in a corpse. Kairos tightened his grip on his gladius. His freedom had led him to this place, but why? Who had lured him here? He stepped forward cautiously, his boots crunching against the debris. "Dati Delaine," a whisper. His head snapped to the side, muscles tensed. Nothing. Only the dim glow of candelabras lining the walls, their flames flickering though there was no breeze. Then, a sound, a scraping like nails against wood. Kairos turned, his breath steady but his pulse quickening. At the far end of the hall, a door stood slightly ajar. He hadn't noticed it before. A cold draft seeped from within, carrying the stench of decay. He approached slowly. With a careful push, he widened the gap, revealing a vast dining hall. A long table stretched through the center, its surface set with tarnished silverware and dust-covered plates. A chandelier loomed overhead, its crystals dulled with age. And at the far end of the table sat a figure. A man, dressed in noble robes, his skin sickly pale. His head was slumped forward, his long black hair hanging over his face. Dead? Kairos stepped closer. The stench of rot thickened. The man's head snapped up. Kairos jumped back, blade raised. The noble's eyes were black pits, his mouth stretching into a grin too wide for his face. His lips cracked as he spoke, his voice wet and rasping. "You finally arrived, Gladiator." Kairos didn't answer. Every instinct screamed at him to attack. The noble let out a slow, rattling chuckle. "Do you know where you are?" Kairos stayed silent. "This is no ordinary place, and you, warrior, are no ordinary man." The noble's fingers twitched, his bones creaking. "You fight for freedom, but what if freedom is the cruelest trap of all?" Kairos lunged. The gladius sliced through the air, but struck nothing. The noble had vanished. A guttural laugh echoed from the shadows. The candelabras flickered, their flames stretching unnaturally high before plunging the room into darkness. Then the whispering began again, low, faint, but growing louder. Kairos's breath was steady, but he felt something crawl up his spine, something ancient, something wrong. Then the whispers stopped. A single voice spoke in the darkness. "You should not have come here." And the doors slammed shut behind him. Kairos spun around, his gladius raised. The dining hall doors had slammed shut with unnatural force, sealing him inside. The candelabras flickered wildly before their flames died, plunging the room into darkness. He controlled his breathing, listening. The silence was heavy, but it wasn't empty. The air was charged, as if the very walls were holding their breath. Then, scraping, a slow, deliberate sound, like bone dragging across wood. Kairos turned toward the source. His eyes adjusted to the dark, making out a shifting shape at the head of the long dining table. The noble was back, but now his body was wrong. His limbs were twisted, unnaturally elongated, his fingers curling like talons. His mouth stretched grotesquely, lips peeling back over too many teeth. The black pits of his eyes swirled like ink and water. Kairos tightened his grip on his blade. "What are you?" The thing cocked its head, an eerie smile splitting its face. "A question with no answer, Gladiator." Its voice was layered, as though a chorus of voices spoke in unison. "But you are a man who knows battle, knows suffering. You have fought for freedom, and yet here you stand, caged once more." Kairos took a step forward, steady. "I will find my way out." The creature chuckled, a sick, gurgling sound. "Will you?" It lifted one skeletal hand and pointed. The room shifted. The grand dining table, the towering walls, everything warped, stretching outward as if the mansion itself was breathing. Shadows curled like living things, reshaping the space around him. The air thickened, pressing against his chest. Kairos turned, trying to locate the exit. The doors were gone. He was no longer in the dining hall. He now stood in a long, endless corridor. The walls were lined with decayed portraits, their subjects eyeless, faces twisted in silent screams. The air smelled of damp wood and something metallic. Blood. Behind him, the creature's voice whispered, close to his ear. "Run!" Kairos didn't hesitate. He bolted forward, boots pounding against the wooden floor. The corridor seemed to stretch on forever, the paintings warping as he passed. The whispers rose, turning into wails. Then, movement. Something skittered along the ceiling, a mass of limbs and shadows. It kept pace with him, its clawed hands digging into the wood above. Kairos didn't slow. A doorway appeared at the end of the hall. A chance. He sprinted toward it, every muscle straining. A hand shot from the darkness, clawed fingers inches from his throat. He ducked, rolled, and burst through the doorway. The door slammed shut behind him. Silence. Kairos staggered upright, his heart hammering. He was in a new room now, circular, lined with bookshelves stretching to the ceiling. A grand library. A single candle flickered on a wooden desk, and in the chair beside it sat a woman. She was draped in a tattered black gown, her face hidden beneath a veil. But Kairos could feel her gaze upon him, cold and knowing. "You shouldn't be here," she murmured. Kairos exhaled slowly, his grip still firm on his weapon. "I didn't have a choice." The woman lifted her hand, gesturing to the shifting shadows beyond the bookshelves. "No one does." Kairos narrowed his eyes. "Then tell me, what is this place?" The woman tilted her head. "A house that hungers." A deep, guttural groan echoed through the walls, as if the mansion itself had heard. Kairos clenched his jaw. His true fight was only beginning. The library was deathly still, the air thick with the scent of aged parchment and something more sinister, like damp rot festering beneath the wooden floors. Kairos stood motionless, his pulse steady despite the unease curling in his gut. The veiled woman remained seated, hands resting gently on the table. The candle's weak glow flickered against the tattered lace covering her face. A house that hungers? Her words echoed in Kairos's mind. He had fought countless battles, faced beasts and men alike, but this was different. Here his blade felt small. "I don't believe in curses," Kairos said, his voice low. "Only chains that need breaking." The woman's fingers twitched slightly. "Then you are a fool." Kairos took a slow step forward. "Who are you?" The woman exhaled, and for the first time, Kairos noticed how cold the air was around her. "Once, I had a name," she murmured. "But the house takes from us all. Our names, our time, our souls." Kairos frowned. "You're trapped here?" She gave a slow, deliberate nod. "As are you, Gladiator." Kairos clenched his jaw. "I didn't come here willingly." The woman tilted her head, the candlelight catching on the faint curve of her lips. "Didn't you?" A shiver crawled down Kairos's spine. He thought of the cloaked figure who had given him the key to escape, who had led him to the black carriage, to this mansion. Had it truly been a gift of freedom? Or a hand guiding him into a different kind of prison? Kairos shook off the thought. "There's always a way out." The woman's fingers traced the edge of the table. "Perhaps," she said, "but the house does not let go easily. It is alive. It changes, it watches, and when it chooses, it devours." Kairos had heard enough. He needed answers, not riddles. "Then tell me how to kill it." The woman let out a soft, hollow laugh. "Kill it?" She leaned forward slightly. "You are not in an arena anymore, warrior. This is not an enemy you can simply cut down." Kairos set his gladius on the table between them, its steel glinting in the dim light. "I've fought gods in the sand. Tell me what I need to do." The veiled woman went silent. Then, after a long pause, she reached into the folds of her gown and pulled out something small and delicate, a key, rusted and ancient. She placed it beside his blade. "This will lead you to the heart of the house." Kairos studied the key. "And what waits there?" The woman's fingers curled slightly, as though the very mention of it sent a chill through her bones. "The one who built this place," she whispered. "The architect." Kairos narrowed his eyes. "Who is he?" The candlelight flickered. The shadows in the room thickened, stretching unnaturally against the bookshelves. The woman inhaled sharply. "He is awake." A loud boom echoed through the mansion. The walls trembled. The bookshelves groaned, their wooden spines cracking under unseen pressure. Kairos snatched the key and his blade. "Where do I go?" The woman stood, moving with a grace that seemed almost inhuman. "Through the east wing. The door with the red sigil. Do not stray from the path. Do not listen to the voices." Kairos nodded. He turned to leave. But then he hesitated. "Will you come with me?" The woman was silent. Then her voice came soft and resigned. "I belong to the house now." Kairos frowned. "Then why help me?" For the first time, she lifted her veil. Her face was half gone, decayed. like something between life and death. Because you still have a chance. The candle's flame extinguished. Darkness swallowed the room. Kairos turned and ran. Behind him, the whispers of the house rose once more. And somewhere deep within its walls, something laughed. Kairos moved swiftly through the mansion's endless corridors, the rusted key clutched tightly in his hand. The walls twisted unnaturally, the air thick with the scent of decay. Shadows slithered along the ceiling, watching, waiting. He reached the door the veiled woman had described, a massive wooden slab marked with a crimson sigil, drawn in what he knew was blood. The moment he pressed the key into the lock, the sigil pulsed like a beating heart. The door swung open. Beyond was a spiraling staircase, descending into utter blackness. A guttural groan reverberated from below. Kairos stepped forward. With each step down, the air grew heavier, the whispers more urgent. Turn back. He sees you. You are too late. He ignored them. At the bottom, a vast chamber stretched before him. Torches lined the walls, their flames an eerie green, casting sickly shadows. And at the center stood him, the architect, a towering figure draped in tattered black robes, his face hidden beneath a mask of bone. His presence was suffocating, as if the very walls of the house bent to his will. Kairos raised his blade. You built this place. The architect tilted his head. And it has served me well. His voice was layered, ancient. Many have walked these halls, seeking escape. None have left. Kairos stepped forward. That changes tonight, the architect chuckled. You misunderstand, Gladiator. You were never brought here to escape. You were brought here to replace me. Kairos froze. The house must have a master, the architect continued. A heart to sustain it. And you, strong, relentless, undefeated, you are worthy. The shadows twisted. The walls trembled. The mansion breathed. Kairos felt something creeping into his mind. A cold, insidious pull, whispering promises of power, of eternity. But he had spent his whole life in chains. He would not wear another. With a roar, he lunged. The architect raised a skeletal hand, and the shadows lashed out. Kairos dodged, rolling beneath the inky tendrils, slicing through them. They screeched, retreating as his blade glowed faintly. The house resisted him, but it feared him. The architect moved unnaturally fast, striking with a hand wreathed in darkness. Kairos blocked, but the impact sent him skidding backward. Submit, the architect commanded. Kairos spat blood. Never. He rushed forward, dodging the next strike and driving his gladius deep into the architect's chest. A deafening scream tore through the chamber. The walls cracked. The torches flickered wildly. The house shook. The architect staggered, his form unraveling like smoke. You cannot kill the house, he bellowed. Kairos twisted the blade. Then I'll bring it down with you. The architect's mask shattered. Beneath it was no face, only a gaping void. He let out one last, soul-wrenching howl before collapsing into nothingness. The house let out a terrible groan. The walls crumbled. The floor split open. Kairos ran. The corridors collapsed behind him, the whispers turning to shrieks. The exit, he could see it. The grand doors stood open, daylight spilling in. He leapt through, and the mansion imploded.